Би Jargal сайхан байна. Та юу чадхаа, юу байгаагаараа, хаа байгаа газараа хичээнгүүлэн хий.
Сайн байцгаана уу хүн үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр манай де факто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Монголд урилгаар ирсэн олон хүмүүсийн, олон хөгжимчдийн, олон балетын жүжигчдийн нэг Марк Чөрчиллс оролцож байна.
Марк Чөрчиллс, хөгжмийн удирдаач, хийлч, сурган хүмүүжүүлэгч Марк Чөрчиллс 1992 оноос хойш Бостны балетын удирдаачаар ажиллаж байна. Ноён Churchill Хонконг, Шинэ Зеландын оркестрт ажилласнаас гадна Америк нэгдсэн улс, Өмнөд Америк, Аз тивийн улс орнуудад цуврал аялан тоглолт хийж байжээ. Марк Чөрчиллс хөгжмийн урлагт 30 жилийн турш хүчин зүтгэх хугацаанд орон нутаг үндэсний буюу олон улсын түншүүдийн тусламжтайгаар ахлах сургуулийн сурагчид, насан туршид зориулан хөгжмийн мэргэжлийн сургалтын хөтөлбөр хэрэгжүүлсэн байна.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Thank you for being a guest of the program.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
What is your mission in Mongolia now?
My mission in Mongolia is to help develop the ballet, contribute to the artistic energy and capacity of your wonderful ballet company and orchestra, and do what I can to help.
What kind of performance you have been doing now here?
Well, we just had a performance of Swan Lake 2 days ago.
Yes.
I just arrived a few days before, so it was a very intensive preparation time.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, your beautiful company of ballet dancers and orchestra have performed Swan Lake many times. But we added some solos, some principals from South America, from Asia, from United States, from South Africa. To join with the Mongolian Ballet Company, State Ballet Company, to make a kind of international connection. And
if there was something new movement that otherwise they have not been doing before in Mongolia, in that particular
in
ballet?
This particular production, well, artistic interpretation is always very personal. So, as the conductor, I have to manage everyone's individual contribution.
Your musicians were all Mongolians?
What's that?
Your musicians were all Mongolians?
All Mongolians, yes.
How many there?
Just the orchestra.
How many in the orchestra?
It's about 65 in the orchestra.
65.
And it's the State Opera and Ballet Orchestra. Excellent orchestra, very dedicated, very hardworking, very well trained.
Was it hard to tune to the performance of international performers here?
For them to tune
Yes.
to? It's a little bit challenging, but they did very well. They had only a few rehearsals.
Okay, you have another few performances.
Well, we have a gala, a mixed program of different. But the Swan Lake, of course, is perhaps the greatest classical ballet that was ever done. It's many of the players and dancers learned either directly from the Russian teachers and artists,
Yes.
or through their own teachers who studied in Russia.
Yes.
So they have a very established way of performing this work.
You have an American school. Here the people with the Russian school.
Let's say it's an international school, which is very influenced by the Russian.
And your art, the art of movement and art of ballet, opera, all this do not need interpretation.
Well, that's right, but everybody brings, whether they're Russian or American or English or South American, they bring their own vision to their part. They bring their vision to their part, and then I, as a conductor, have to take what's here already in Mongolia, what the international artists bring from their different places, which is always very different, and my own sense of both the architecture of the work, which is the large scale, down to the very tiny details.
I see.
So it's my job to have a strong vision, but also to bring all of the different approaches together into some whole that is logical.
How has it happened that you are here with particular performance? You are in Mongolia. Tell us.
Well, that has everything to do with Altan Klyag,
Okay.
Lugara. Altan came to Boston 4 years ago. I'm the associate conductor of the Boston Ballet, and he joined the Boston Ballet Company. And quickly I saw in him a young man of tremendous talent, great determination, fantastic discipline, but something bigger, a kind of vision and a kind of energy about wanting to contribute, a kind of ambition in the best sense. So I said, this young man is really going to make a difference in the world. And so I got to know him and his beautiful family very soon after he came. We were able to help his family very much with just some practical things and some more,
in Boston.
In Boston, his beautiful daughter was, a favorite of my daughters, and so forth and so on.
Okay.
So, but the important thing is that when Altan dances with the Boston Ballet, it's always something very unique. He has a great charisma, of course, he has a great talent, but he also, in terms of interpretation, really brings something very personal to what his dancing. We have very few Mongolians in Boston, maybe 12 or 15 families, that's all. So we're not so familiar with Mongolian people.
In particular, ballet.
Yes, well, anything, in any way. But I like to say that the Dugara family are like walking public relation campaign for Mongolia.
Wow, okay.
Because they're so much respected and so much loved by everybody around them that they make us think about Mongolia. And even 4 years ago, I said, Altan, when can I go to Mongolia?
I see.
So you must, I'm very fascinated by your country.
So you not only alone returned for holiday to the country back, but also he brought you and other international ballet dancers.
Well, that's right. Well, that's because of his own commitment to contributing to the development of not only ballet, but art in general in Mongolia. Many in developing countries, you yourself said Mongolia was a developing country. I think all the countries are developing all the time. But, when somebody is able to become an international figure in whatever profession, they don't always keep their connection back to their homeland. And I feel that it's very important to give back, to acknowledge where you came from, what supported your development, and the deep roots of your culture. I think it's very important for a human being to do that.
Have you seen something that makes him that much enthusiastic for one country here while you are visiting Mongolia?
Here in Mongolia? Well, I think, you can see, I think it's well known that Altan grew up in the countryside, started out as a folk dancer as a child.
Yeah, his father was a
folk dancer. Yes. So he comes from the land, really. And then, of course, he was trained in Ulaanbaatar by the Soviet School of Ballet, and obviously very talented, started becoming recognized and so forth. But I think, although he has gone out from Mongolia, he remains very connected, and you can see it in the way he relates to his colleagues, his family, extended family, his friends. We went to the countryside yesterday, and we were riding horses and camels, and eating in gers and all of that. And you can see that there's a very strong basis of humanity there. So for me, that's very, very moving, and that's why I really feel very privileged to support that vision.
You have been educating young people all around the world.
Yes.
Through music.
Yes.
Tell us about, and what is the most remarkable thing you think you have completed in this field?
Well, I believe that music and art are about two things principally. One is community, bringing people together into community, a very healthy, positive kind of community, local, national, international. Of course, here we see a great example of international community. I also think art, and particularly music, is a wonderful vehicle for educating the human being. And in music, we have a very intricate balance of 4 aspects, or even 5, you could say, of what a human being is about. We have the intellectual, the emotional, the physical, and you could even say the spiritual or the transcendent. And in classical music in particular, because of the discipline, the physical discipline required, it's really like a sport. And because of the intellectual and the intellectual development and knowledge that it takes to understand the intricacies of music, especially great music like Tchaikovsky and Mahler and Mozart and so forth, you really have to study, you have to tax your brain. And
it's another discipline, very strong.
And of course it's very much about the heart and the emotion. And yet it's beyond words.
Yes.
It's something we might call spiritual or what's the word? Transcendent, let's say. Now, of course, we as people are not divided up into sections, the emotions, the mind, the body. We know that it's all, more and more we know that it's all together. And yet, most of our education divides things, We have our physical education, we have our intellectual education. We don't have too much emotional community education. By the way, the 5th thing that some art does is social development.
Yes.
It encourages people to learn how to relate and connect with each other humanly. But when you have an art form, it puts all of these human dimensions together into one integrated whole, which is the way we are as people. And so I think the value for young people to study art and become exposed to art and really deeply embedded in art is, of course, in itself a great pleasure, both while they're doing it and for their life as an avocation. But it also develops or gives one many transferable aspects of knowledge and humanity that help with any other profession. It's interesting, in the United States we observe that most medical people have strong music in their background. We have an orchestra in Boston of medical community, doctors, nurses, medical practitioners. And the joke on the street is it's harder to get into that orchestra than it is to get into Harvard Medical School. Because so many young medical students are very, very accomplished musicians.
Speaking about Harvard, there's a Harvard ballet group, right?
Oh, they're small ones.
Yeah, you have been working with one of them?
Not me personally, no.
Okay. With the music, I thought, I would think those who likes music, the children in particular who love music, they will have a less chance to be violent. Would you agree?
Oh, I fully agree. Young people who are involved with music are so absorbed and they have such good relationships through the music that I have seen very little problematic children involved in music. And in fact, I can tell you the story about something that began 35 years ago in Venezuela, in South America. And now we call it El Sistema. But a great visionary man named Jose Antonio Abreu, fine musician, economist, government minister, man of tremendous capacity, said, music is the best way to address the poverty of our country.
Wow. Like Simón Bolívar said many years ago, 250 years ago, education was the way of development.
Yes, that's right. But I think he also agreed, Dr. Abreu agreed with me about the larger dimension of arts education and music education. But of course, so he began this system that now in Venezuela has over 400,000 children studying music 6 days a week, maybe 20 to 30 hours a day, playing in youth orchestras all over the place. This system is being imitated all over the world.
Is it special education, or it is along with the school? Or
it's after school.
After school program. Wow.
And so children will play for 4 or 5 hours a day, and the poorest children, they have a home, they have a community, they have nurturing adults, they have something, they have instruments, they connect with a society that is an orchestra.
Children of poor families.
Totally poor. It's totally subsidized.
The musical instrument, everything is subsidized, including the teacher, accommodation, everything. And that helps them to be a better person?
It completely uplifts them.
You said 30 years ago.
35 years ago.
So what is the result? Where are they now, the children who started?
Well, some of them have become remarkable musicians.
Wow.
The leading conductor in the world is Gustavo Dudamel, a young conductor, 30 years old, conductor of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, conducts all over the world, recordings, the most popular conductor from Venezuela.
From Venezuela, from those schools.
Unbelievable. But also doctors, lawyers, government officials. In Venezuela, now, more than 75% of the medical students are graduates of this music program.
Oh my.
Can you believe that? So it's not just about making musicians. It's producing what a beautiful thing that Dr. Abreu talks about, which is to address poverty, one must focus on developing an affluence of the spirit. In other words, a sense of self-value,
yes,
a sense of possibility and hope.
Yes, sense of
spiritual
service, yes.
affluence. Once you have that, then you can overcome your physical desires.
Wow.
Or limitations. If you feed somebody, give them a house, not enough.
Not enough.
If they don't have that motivation, they don't have the desire to achieve and to contribute. And playing music in an orchestral situation, it's like a perfect model society.
So it's overcome material desire.
Right.
Wow.
Well, it's understanding these dynamics of what I described, the blend of these human dynamics. I developed some years ago something called El Sistema USA.
Okay.
In order to bring this concept to the United States. And we are doing pretty well. We have about 40 or 50 programs now throughout the United States, and it's growing. But all through the world, let me give you an example. The El Sistema model from Venezuela is very popular now in Korea, South Korea.
Okay.
I went to Korea in January to talk in a symposium about El Sistema. And many interviews, many interested parties. The Korean government is committing $50 million to begin Korean El Sistema programs for Korean children.
Wow.
Now, why are they doing this?
Why?
I said, this is interesting. It's not like Latin America. You don't have 80% poverty level. You have some poor people, of course, but not, So they said, well, we feel that our education is doing a very good job educating the intellect of young people, children.
In Korea in particular?
In Korea. Very, of course. Asian education, very strong. But we are not doing very much with the emotion, with the socialization of the children. And we feel that this is a great answer to adding those things to our education system. Through these music programs.
Wow.
So we'll see what happens. It's just in the beginning.
Very interesting. Mark, let me share you with one concept, one vision I have been always thinking. We learn history in schools through wars,
Yes.
all this stuff. Some dictators, tsars, revolutions. Instead, couldn't we teach the children with music? 1600, 1700, lessons starting from Bach, whatever, then Haydn, Mozart, in these sequences. So that one day the Haydn was partially a teacher of Mozart. That would be very interesting, right? And then go to Chopin, why he had moved. Can we change the world in such a way that we teach music through history through music and paintings? How do you like it?
That's a beautiful concept. And there are many enlightened teachers who are doing that.
Is it?
Well, if you study art or music, as a profession, then you study art history or music history.
Yes.
So you do it in that way. But
in the ordinary schools.
Yeah, in the ordinary, we talk about a lot about integrating arts into the curriculum, the core curriculum, using art as a tool to enhance learning. So there are many very good approaches, not common yet in the United States, but more and more, where we're doing just that. We're not talking just about the wars and the government. We're talking about the cultural history, how the art is both an expression of the time, but also influences the time. That's always a balance.
Vice versa, yes.
And that's the sort of thing that really engages children. It makes them want to learn, not just the dates and
that's
the wars.
That's actually a wonderful culture.
So you are
new generation of education system, no?
Right. And so let's keep working on it.
Okay, please tell us about Sir Yehudi Menuhin.
Sir Yehudi Menuhin. Well,
Menuhin,
he's, in my life, connected mostly with something called the Asian Youth Orchestra. Now, the Asian Youth Orchestra was founded in 1990, and it's a concept which comes from Europe, modeled on the European Community Youth Orchestra. And in an international youth orchestra like this, and only a few exist, outstanding musicians from age maybe 16 to 26 or 28 are auditioned, brought together into an intensive rehearsal period, usually in the summer, 2 or 3 weeks, and then they tour together. So an American man founded this with Sir Yehudi Menuhin, Richard Pontius, and he was conducting in Asia. He was from San Francisco, and he said, the Asian students, they're very good at their individual study, and so they become very accomplished as violinists, pianists, clarinet players, but they don't have the opportunity to play together in an ensemble. So it's very similar to what happened in Venezuela. So he said, I want to create an orchestra that brings together 14, 15, 16 Asian countries, outstanding young people, and brings them together for intensive rehearsal and then tours them. And at the beginning, for 11 years, from the first 11 years, from 1990 to 2001, I was the resident conductor. So I was... Well, this was an Asian youth orchestra and only open to students from Asia.
I see.
Not Asian students who had studied in Europe or were studying in the United States. So because those students had those opportunities to play in very dynamic, large orchestras. So I remember very well, the first year we had our rehearsal camp, our rehearsal period in Kumamoto, Japan. And students came from Korea and not China yet, but Vietnam and Singapore and Philippines and, of course,
early 90s.
Japan, 1990, yes, 1990.
Okay.
And it was very, very moving because, of course, there was no common language. The common language was English, which was really lucky for me. But there was some very great sensitivity. The Korean, we started out with a week of homestays in the Japanese homes in Kumamoto. So some of the Korean and Taiwanese families were very nervous about their children staying in Japanese homes. They still were very strong feelings, of course. But of course, after a few hours, a few days, everybody came together, and so it's a symbol of... A youth orchestra like that does a number of things. It gives a direct music education, an opportunity to learn about music in a way that one doesn't have in their own school or city. It also is a symbol of how international cooperation can happen in the best sense, how one can achieve something, a whole that is much greater than the parts, as we say.
And is it now working?
It's working great.
And if there is any Mongolian participant?
Well, that's a very interesting question. There has not been a Mongolian participation yet.
What is the reason?
I don't know.
We have a musical school. Why there would not
Well,
sing?
you do, and I know that I am supposed to speak to the director of the school.
Okay, please do.
So the first thing I will say is, please host some auditions for the Asian Youth Orchestra.
Yes.
because I think it's really important that the Mongolian students connect.
That's we have with this democracy and freedom. We are more entering to the world, otherwise not known to public 20 years ago.
Yes.
Now we are more and more trying to send people, young people abroad.
Yes.
Which is a good sign, and if this is true, like such a good thing like music, that would be fantastic.
It would be. We have to do that. Let's make a personal commitment, you and me.
All right, okay. All right.
Because this is the way it happens. I remember when the first students came from Vietnam, and they were very unaware of the world outside of Ho Chi Minh City. But instantly, you know, what happens my job was to take the students from 14, 15 countries and then rehearse for 2 weeks intensively, 3 2.5-hour rehearsals every day, 7.5 hours of rehearsals a day. And, you know, first they're very scared and they don't know what to do, you know, and within a day or two, they're like one big family.
Okay.
It's a beautiful thing.
You yourself, which instrument do you play? What is your profession?
I studied as a cellist and also conductor.
Okay. You were first as cellist, then a conductor. Why you have decided to move into conductor?
Oh, well, that's a long story. I'm a kind of, I have a variety of contributions, so I never specialized too much. So I play a little bit the cello, but I teach very gifted cellists, young cellists who often go on to big careers. So I like doing that. I love the experience of making music as a conductor because you know what the conductor does is 90% education.
I see.
And 10%
of your time.
Because the conductor doesn't make a sound.
Yes.
You know.
Except movement.
So what the conductor does is guides and nurtures and encourages and balances and just, you know, convinces the players.
You said encourages.
Encourages.
Probably certain times you have to encourage somebody to do saying it's good, then go ahead.
Very, very much. So it's the same qualities as a teacher, really. And if you do your job well as a conductor, what you have to do in the performance is not very much, because you have prepared the musicians to express the music in the way they do. That's your job.
And you are you do orchestra work for ballet performance usually, or what nowadays?
I have my own orchestra, symphonic orchestra, so we do symphonies of, you know, and concertos and just orchestra music.
Wow. Chamber orchestra?
No, large orchestra. I also have had chamber orchestra.
And where do you play? Where do you perform?
We perform in the state, in the Boston area, in Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah.
And how many people? You said a lot of people involved. Professionals?
75, 80 people.
And how many days you perform usually a year?
This is what we call a regional community orchestra. It's not. It's some professionals and some amateurs who, like those doctors who had professional training but then went into another profession.
So you guys get together, and how often do you perform?
Once or twice a week. We play 4 programs per year, two times each. So it's not very intensive.
Oh, okay.
But it's 4 big programs. We play big music, because I do a lot of things.
Wow.
But I also have had an opera company, a small opera company, and my biggest professional role has been with the Boston Ballet. So professionally, my focus is as a ballet conductor.
Let's talk a little bit about the ballet as first as an art, and then as a business, then as a agent of changes in the mind of people in terms of they're looking the world in a better way.
Oh, that's a nice,
all right,
nice list. That's a nice list of questions.
Okay, first, as an art, it is which country the ballet is the most developed in the world today, and why?
Yeah. Well, of course, the Soviet Union committed very strongly to ballet.
Spent big investment.
There was a great, in the Romantic, before the Russian Revolution, of course, with Tchaikovsky and the classical ballet development, there was a great focus on ballet, mostly in St. Petersburg, some in Moscow. But for some reason, the Soviet mentality supported ballet. And it's interesting to study or to consider why. Yes. I mean, it was about beautiful stories of human achievement and people overcoming obstacles and triumphing in the end. And that was part of the Soviet spirit to human perseverance and hope. And
this is a good quality.
Right, exactly. So the ballet was a symbol of that. Uh-huh. But it also lent itself, I think, to the discipline and the commitment that ballet dancers have to make to achieve the height or professional level, and then a high level. That was very much in the mentality of the driving, disciplined Russian Soviet spirit. So, of course, the Russian school became a major contributor to ballet. Mm-hmm. Very important English school, and then I would say the third one in many centers, but was in the United States under the direction of George Balanchine, who created the New York City Ballet. Mm-hmm. And he was a great musician and a great dancer and choreographer. Wow. He worked with some of the greatest composers, collaborated, Stravinsky and Prokofiev and so forth, and created a style of ballet that's quite unique and very much connected with the music. And then, of course, the other great force was Diaghilev and the Ballet Russe. Mm-hmm. Now, that's connected with Russian, but it was in Europe, in Monte Carlo, so it had French influences and European influences blended with the Russian. So that was a different style. But now, in all of our classical arts, we are very few people stay on one track. They are usually trained in one approach, but they expand and take elements from different approaches, and they create their own style if they're running a company, or they create their own style within themselves. So this is something that's developing as the world becomes more international, more global. And of course, just like in everything, our struggle is how to retain our identity, our roots, our nationality, our ethnicity, the deep roots that we have as human beings, and at the same time be connected and tolerant.
Then as a business in United States, the financing of certainly it's very expensive work. You hire not ordinary people, very talented in particular field, extraordinary people to have extraordinary performance. Should be expensive, I know somehow, the art of performing art, theater of performing arts in Denver. It's quite expensive, cost-wise rendezvous. So what do you do?
Well, in the United States we are pretty unique because we have very little government support of the arts. We have mostly private philanthropy, private support of the arts. So individuals who have achieved their own wealth feel a responsibility to give back by supporting not only social services, medical services, educational services, but also the arts. And it's a very touching thing. I've always been very moved by people who have, been able to acquire great wealth, but very committed to sharing that wealth in these ways, through supporting hospital, supporting ballet company.
The United States is unique in that sense.
Unique. And so we're not doing so badly. It's economic times, everybody's struggling, but still we have, opera is becoming more popular, and that's the most expensive.
Do you connect this opera and ballet goers with the general wealth of the society in the material terms, or it is something different? What I mean is, people here, I wish we have more people going to our performances in our theaters, which is not the case. And plus, the tickets are here not expensive too, except these performances you do. But so what can Mongolia do in order to develop this treasure in the country and to develop whatever is remaining from our socialist time, because our best performers have disappeared. They are performing abroad before because they were much better off there. So what you would advise us?
It's all about education. It's all about not just exposing children to these art forms, but giving them opportunities to actually do it, to play music, to dance, to act.
So
you consider sports.
Yeah.
Sports has no problem with an audience. Everybody's buying tickets and going.
Because everybody's exercising.
Everybody played baseball as a child. They kicked around the soccer ball. They played some tennis. They have an experience of how it feels, how difficult it is, and so they can admire the accomplishment. And of course, there's the competitive aspect, which we don't have in the arts so much. We have a little, but not so much. We don't want so much. But it's mostly about the sense of honoring the accomplishment of the athletes.
So you're a very interesting position you have. In order to have this art developed in the country in a good and a real sense, get the children playing music from very young age.
Absolutely.
So that's a school program for music, even kindergarten, and then a separate like this systems.
You wouldn't believe, if I go to Venezuela many times, 30, 40 times. It's like a whole society based on around the arts and music. The young people are so enthusiastic. The audiences, every performance is filled. There's an energy between the audience and because the people performing on stage know who they're performing to. The people listening are connected.
Would it be dominantly folk music or classical music?
But this is classical music.
Tango. We talk about classical music.
No, this is for what I'm. Of course, there's a lot of folk music and popular music, but in this case, it's Mozart and Tchaikovsky and Mahler and Beethoven. It's this classical orchestral music. There's an energy and a life that you wouldn't believe.
What makes these classics you have mentioned really staying like this all the time, in spite of 500 some?
That's an important question. And, we like to think that, or we sometimes think that there are certain universal aspects to certain creations or certain periods of time in artistic creation. So Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, for instance, that was the product of a certain time in a certain place in certain conditions. Yet it seems to be so popular everywhere. In Japan, there are thousands of performances every New Year's Eve of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Why is that? It doesn't. Well, of course, the theme is about a universal brotherhood, and that's a beautiful thing. But still, the music itself captures people. I don't know the answer to that. I think if I were a young person starting my education, I would like to concentrate on finding what is universal about art. I heard a lecture before, last year, about landscape painting, and how if you take all different cultures, there are certain common elements in landscape painting. In music, we are a little dominated by Western music.
It is.
So what is universal in Western music that's the same as Chinese music, traditional Mongolian music? We heard the throat singing this morning and the horsehead fiddle and so forth. And I'm saying now, this is very beautiful, important music, and you can feel how it comes from the depth of the culture and the land and all that. Why isn't this being heard around the world like Beethoven is being heard around the world? What's going on? So that's something we don't know yet. I hope that the world will begin to understand the universal aspects of all ethnic music.
What do you think about pop opera? Pop opera, they call it.
Pop opera.
Yeah.
Well, I love all kinds of experiments, crossover experiments. And, I think it's very important not to keep things in boxes.
Yes.
And everybody has to try to create new expressions and new combinations.
Yes.
And if it's valid, it will last and it will become, an important thread. And if it's not, it will fall away. And so just try everything.
Okay. Well, finally, I would like to ask you a question. What is the most important, most taking your heart classical piece of music, so that you stay just?
Oh my goodness! You know, that's always a difficult question for a musician or an artist, because so many works of art represent different aspects, in very, very important or the most important ways. So it depends where you focus. But I was thinking, after doing Swan Lake, that this has to be, well, there's also something that we tend to think about we tend to think of whatever we're doing at the moment, whatever we're performing and working on, as our favorite piece. So I can say, well, in those days we were working on Swan Lake, and while I was conducting it in your beautiful opera house, that was my favorite work. Okay. And I said, well, why is that? It has qualities that are so...
In that music itself?
Appealing. Yeah. Well, the work itself, it has a whole sweep of human emotion and thinking. It has joy and exuberance and happiness. It has deep sadness. It has tragedy. Yes. It has longing. It has regret. It has so many things that, is part of our human experience. And in a beautiful architectural whole that comes out at the end, in this case, as a very happy ending.
It is probably also because the work itself is as a ballet, combination of a European culture and then a Russian musician, and there is sort of that time global view of music. Would you think?
Well, the theme, which is love and deception, and
it's a German fairy tale,
right? But the sense that one desires an unattainable love, that one is deceived,
yes,
and violated,
yes,
and yet that love overcomes everything in the end. That is not a cultural story. That's a story that every human being in all time, I think, I like to think it's a very common story.
To you, if there is a particular one specific characteristics you would give to, say, to Tchaikovsky, a Russian composer, compared to other classics?
Tchaikovsky himself?
Yes.
I would say the depth of emotion, which is, and the depth and complexity of the emotional fabric of his work, and at the same time, a kind of open appeal. We call it an open access.
Open appeal.
That, you have pop music, which is, of course, can be wonderful, good pop music. It doesn't require a lot of effort to listen to it. It's more coming to you as a kind of entertainment.
Yes, overtaking you.
Classical music, you have to make an effort to,
listen, yes.
And so if you take something like Bruckner or Mahler, something very complex, you can't just put it on the radio and connect with it. You have to focus and use your brain and your heart. Tchaikovsky, I think, he got a different balance, It's a very sophisticated music on one hand, but it's very accessible on the other. You don't have to work so hard to access it, yet it gives you a very elevated experience of art.
Symphony Orchestra Number 1 of Tchaikovsky, to me, it gives a great, wide Russian steep
The Winter Dreams.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's such a, they behave a little bit bigger step, You come and you don't see the... finally, just a few words about chamber orchestra.
Chamber orchestra.
How much is it important for development of music? As I would think in Mongolia, for example, I would prefer to have a small chamber orchestra all around rather than one performing there in one place.
Well, I would start by saying, talking about the importance of chamber music, 3, 4, 5, 6 players. It's number one, very essential to the education of a complete musician to learn how to play in small ensemble, because it's very refined and sophisticated kind of music. Many composers, Beethoven, Mozart, even Tchaikovsky, Prokofiev, Shostakovich, some of their best work, or in some cases their best work, was done for small ensemble, string quartet. The late Beethoven quartets, probably the most elevated achievement. It's really important to to work at the level of perfection and sophistication that chamber music requires, and then for musicians to bring that to the larger ensemble and to do both. There's something very exciting about 100 or 80 or 100 musicians playing together. I mean, you can't deny that has an impact, the brass and the sweep of the strings and everything. But it requires more of your own effort to access the music of a string quartet. But the satisfactions are so profound because the music is so deep and so satisfying. Well, same way with the musician. So I think you need everything. You need it all.
Well, with this note, I would like to thank you for coming to this program, and I would like to thank on behalf of my audience for making our life a few days more brighter.
Well, it's making my life much brighter too, just being here. Can I say one more thing?
Yes, please.
I was talking with the dancers, the guest dancers, after the performance of the Swan Lake. And we all felt so excited and energized by that performance. The audience was so dynamic, and everybody was very excited and uplifted and involved. And we said, you play in Boston and New York and London, you dance, and the level is very high, and everybody works hard, and everybody's very well trained. But this is a different feeling, because it's something so special. And it's something that people are celebrating in a way that you feel a great deep satisfaction, not only from just being involved, but being able to contribute to making that experience happen. So it's a great blessing to be here, to get to know Mongolia, to get a little experience in the countryside, to see the beauty of the nature, and to work with your beautiful artists, musicians, and dancers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's celebrate life every day, wherever we are.
Good philosophy. Let's do
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
It was wonderful talk.
Well, you're...